I realize I stand between you and lunch, so I'm going to try to make this an exciting appetizer, or aperitif, as we say in French. Sonia stole my, my thunder by sharing this quote from Peter Drucker. Yes, culture eats strategy breakfast, lunch, and dinner, probably. As we heard from Sonia before, without culture, without the foundation and the organization to support innovation, you will not succeed. So I thought it was quite fitting to have this quote up on there to start. Just quick run through what I'm going to cover. I'm going to talk about what innovation culture actually means, why it matters, innovation versus disruption. I'm going to do a bit of context setting, and I'm going to give you some practical hack to hack your organization, and some examples. So quick intro about myself, just because I don't want to talk about me personally, but I'm French. And that's not why I use this picture. I use this because I believe that I'm an organizational hacker. I go into teams or in businesses, big, small, and the weaknesses and the opportunities for change. I believe in leading movement. Sonia talked about it as well. You know, being a leader of change, assembling a community and a force for good. And that's possible wherever you are. So as the intro was saying, I was an editor in France. I worked with books. I was writing travel guides. I never thought in a million years that I would end up being a head of technology for a very large FTSE 100 company. But if sometimes opportunities happen and your behavior, your personality, and your belief help you drive change in organization. So I was asked to lead the Penguin digital program 6 months before the Kindle was announced. So we had no idea about what an ebook was, what the Amazon supply chain would be, what the pricing strategy would be. We just were told, go and create some digital version of these printed books. And from this small project, we initially started with 3,000 titles. It became a really wide, company-wide transformation program. My biggest success story was to transform the way an editor, who was 65 years old at the time, who had always been writing and proofreading with a red pen, to teach him how to do this online. And that was a big, change for him, because he ended up being a ways of working change and a culture change, more than just converting print to digital. So what does culture mean? The definition would be, it's the environment that we create that support, enable, and celebrate new, different, challenging, sometimes controversial type of thinking. But more importantly, is the application of that thinking through the organization that matters. Effectively, it's who we are, what we do, and how we do it. And that's culture, bad or good. In an innovation culture, in that space, the words that we've heard from Elliot and Sonia before, the word trust, trusting your teams, that they know what they need to do, empowering them, aligning to the strategy that we talked about, celebrating failure and almost encouraging failure to learn from. And that celebration. Those words actually mean something. They're not just buzzwords that some consultant has just uttered in a leadership meeting. They're really embedded, and it's how people behave. So why does it matter? The short story is it's good for business. It makes money. There are various surveys out there, various stats. I've used one of these that you can see on the slide, where companies who have a culture strategy aligned to their business strategy show a lot more value. 30% higher economic growth. 30% higher economic value, and 17% higher profit growth than the companies who don't care about culture and don't align their culture to their strategy. So it's good for business. It's also quite important from a brand, and that applies to whether you are a corporate or a startup. Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Your brand is what your customer know, is what people engage with. And so if you, Elliot mentioned the Zappos case study. Zappos was a shoe retailer, but they've actually made a business out of their culture because they run culture consultancy. Aligning your culture to your brand and to your purpose gives you a much stronger chance of growth and survival. And with brand come customer satisfaction and customer loyalty. And then talent. Obviously, if people talk about you as a good place to work because you have a great culture, if people talk about you because you are innovative, you will attract more talent and you will retain the talent that you have. So in essence, it's pretty good for running your business. Just some perspective on the buzzword, innovation, disruption, change, transformation. And I've picked a couple of examples, well, actually 3 examples from different industries to show you what corporate innovation looks like and what startup innovation looks like, just for some perspective. This is a very UK-centric example, so apologies if you don't know, but Addison Lee, here on the left, is a really well-known established taxi company. And a few months ago in the tube, I saw this advert that said, we can get you to a USB, basically saying you can charge your phone via USB in our cars. And I wanted to say, hoo, super exciting, right? On the other side, you've got Uber Eats. Forget about the regulation side of it and all the debate around Uber. Actually, a taxi company delivering food, that's a lot more innovative and disruptive. Similar here with the NHS, the National Health Insurance Service in England. They're spending millions trying to make the patient experience more digital, trying to improve their systems, to look at data and patient millions. But they are only scratching the surface because they are 70 years old. At the same time, you've got startup like Push Doctor, who enables you to see a GP via your phone and have a diagnosis in 15 minutes. Again, corporate or public sector versus startup. The last one, a topic that I know quite well because Sonia and I both worked at Pearson together. Pearson and many education providers in the world are just making the classroom a bit more digital. Yes, you have iPads, you have digital blackboards, you have online tests, you have robot teacher sometime. That's just change. That's just modernizing the way you teach. Think about WeGrow. I don't know if anybody has heard of WeGrow. Just a show of hands. Okay, WeGrow is the new education business from WeWork, the world #1 co-working space. They are creating schools and reinventing a school model, effectively. So that's kind of a bit of perspective and a few examples. So, the meat of the subject, how to hack your organizational culture. As I said, I think I'm a hacker. I didn't set out to be talking about culture or change, but I just made my way through it, basically. And the reason I think I've been successful, and I think what you should look at is starting with the why. If you go out if we go out and say, we need to be more innovative, yeah, sure, sounds quite interesting, but why? Is it to survive? Is it to grow? Is it to find new customers? And is it a new industry, a new market? So setting the broader context for your transformation effort is really important. Helping everybody across the organization to understand what the market challenges are, what new technology you want to look at, what the customer behaviors are, how they're changing, how you're not meeting their needs. That's really key. Aligning this to business strategy, I'm not going to cover this again, but Sonia made a good point for it. Being transparent and honest is the #1 advice that I would have. Get your leaders to say to their employees, I don't know, I need your help to find out the answers. I'm scared. This is a pretty scary time. Help me. That's the #1 advice I would have. Connecting people to their limbic brain. We think with the neocortex and we behave and feel with the limbic brain. That's how people react to change. And be clear on your purpose. And I'll talk about an example later of a really successful, really well-known brand who just moved away from the purpose and they paid the price for it. To start a culture change, or to start any kind of change movement, you've got to create that spark. And there are numbers of ways of doing this. The first thing I would say is start being a bit of an explorer, a discovery, and ask questions. You know, empowered you to be your the innovation explorers, or I'm not sure what word you use, but you know, you're empowered to do this. Ask questions. Ask what's not working. Challenge your leadership, saying, why are we doing this way? Go and shadow people in other teams to understand what's happening in other parts of the organization. And that way you find your change champions. You find the people that really believe in this. Because the chances are you're probably not alone, but you feel alone because you're in one team, in one part of a sometimes very large company. When I was at Pearson leading customer experience globally, I was tasked with a very simple mission of benchmarking customer satisfaction for 30 products to feed into Sonia's lifecycle framework. And I had no budget. I was on my own. I didn't know what NPS was. I was just asked. I was just been told to benchmark this. And instead of doing 30 in 3 months, we did 500 in 2 months. And the reason for that is because we built a community of people who believed in change, who believed in getting customer feedback to drive better product management. So find your change champion. Incubate those change initiatives. So as Sonia was saying, start small. Find one business unit, one product, one team where you want to change the way they work. Whether it's meetings that you disagree with, whether it's process or funding, start that you know you're going to have success, because that allows you to tell the story and share that more widely with the organization. As I said, hack the system. Hacking is also, it's a term that's very often is deemed negative, but actually you can break stuff to make them better. And as I said, you can say no to things. You can refuse to go to a meeting if you think it's not adding any value. If you can sometimes take risk of being in contradiction with the management team. Look outside, go to conferences, read blogs, share YouTube videos. There's hundreds and hundreds of really great speakers and bloggers and books. But also look at your customers and their needs and their behaviors. Go on customer safari. I don't like this word, but go and follow your customers in their everyday life to understand how they behave and what they need. And we talked about fueling this with data. So, we didn't coordinate our slide with Sonia, but the same one, leadership challenge. So Steve Jobs said that innovation is what differentiates leaders from followers. I would turn this around and say that actually leadership is what differentiates success in innovation from failure. Those movements, those hacking movements, they won't survive if you don't have exactly sponsorship. Again, I'll take the example at Pearson. When I managed to get those 500 product benchmark, I didn't realize that I needed some money to hire somebody and to take this to the next step of a customer experience framework. And there was no real business case for it because it was sort of a thing that I believed in, but there was no money to be found in the organization. So what I did is I printed 100,000 comments of our customers across the world on the work that we did. And it was before Christmas, and I wrapped them in a Christmas paper for our CEO, went to a meeting with him and said, I've got no business case, but I've got this. It's a present for you. Read it. If you think that it matters, if you think that we need to think about our customers differently and we need to help them and fix our products to meet their needs, call me back after Christmas and I'll come and, by the way, I need £1 million. And then he did, because he read, probably not all 100,000, but he read quite a few of them, and he was like, oh, shit, we've got a problem. So that's sometimes, those small, sometimes gimmicky things can change the leadership mindset. Because it is about changing the attitude to risk, right? It's about helping the leadership understand that they've got to make that leap of faith. And we talked about them saying, I don't know, help me. You know, I've hired you, you're smarter than me in many aspects. Help me work out the problem. We talked about celebrating failure and encouraging learning. I think that's a really, really important part. The reason why Penguin and Pearson, I think, were such a great place to work and to be innovative is because the entire culture of the organization was very innovative. You know, we disrupted our own business model by creating digital books, but we managed to run both in parallel because we had a CEO and an MD who believed in not competition between the print and digital, but we just believed in trying different things. And we managed to do some really great stuff with content on both channels, on both digital and print, because he allowed us to do that. The middle management, the permafrost of the iceberg, these people are typically quite they're quite experienced. They've been in the company for a long time, and they're scared. So if you ignore them by just creating an innovation lab with 20-year-old in jeans or flip-flops, you're ignoring an entire part of the organization, and they're the people who are going to drive change. And you can spend time, and it does take time, it does take energy to coach these people, to do lots of one-to-one sessions, to try to reassure them, to try to convince change is positive, and actually to teach them new skills. Talent. The one thing that will drive your innovation culture is talent, is people. And the places that I've worked with, or the clients that I've worked with, where talent is really rewarded and celebrated, are places that have diversity at the heart. Diversity of opinions, diversity of culture, diversity of gender, diversity of age. That needs to be built in the core of your recruitment strategies. And yes, sometimes you have to measure it. You have to have some diversity KPIs to be successful. Because that's the way to get multiple opinions, multiple ideas. If you're just in your bubble, whether you're hiring just in Belgrade and you're hiring one type of person, whether you're not going to get ideas from people who have different backgrounds. We talked about adaptability. I think that's the #1 skills that we need to learn and teach people in business. That's hard. But sometimes, if you reward them properly, not rewarding them by direct sales performance, but actually rewarding them by the number of experiments that they failed, it can work. Represent your customers. So if you're a brand and you have and you sell a product for 50-year-old, and you only have 25-year-old in your organization, how can you possibly know what 50-year-old need? So try to think in your recruitment and your talent strategy, try to think about representing your audience, because that's how you're going to be able to build the best product for them. Investing. Talent is expensive, but it's worth doing. And don't forget your offshore or your outsourced team. The one thing I've learned working in technology particularly is that you have a lot of partners across the world that you work with. We had a team in India, we had a team in Romania, in Lithuania. They are part of your teams, and they are also, their culture should mix with yours. That's the great thing about partnerships, is if you find the right partner that has the right culture, that has a similar culture to what you do, you're then able to drive the change together. So a few tips, a few things that you could try to start hacking your organization. I said break things, say stop. Say stop to this type of meetings that are boring and nothing ever comes out of it. Say stop to this report that everybody is supposed to be pulling together on a Friday when you're busy doing something else, and nobody's going to read it. Why should you do it? Say stop. We talked about expanding the definition of innovation to beyond product. It's about business model. It's about process. Sometimes a process change is actually a lot more powerful than a new product. You can run a few hackathons. It's quite, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. And you can run hackathon not just on product, but actually on process change. Document your mistakes. I worked for an academic publisher once, and we worked with academics. And we realized that people working in labs, when they fail experiments, they don't communicate it. There's no place in the world that sort of centralizes the failed experiment in science. What a waste of time. What a waste of resources, because you've got people working in the US, in Australia, in Hong Kong on the same topic, and they're failing at the same time or not at the same time, and nobody's documenting that. Still with pride. There's lots of really good ideas out there. Nobody owns innovation, or nobody owns practices, or language. Just still, reuse, tweak. Go on a mystery shopping. Go and follow your customers, because that's the same way I did with my 100,000 comments to my CEO. Just go and record a video of your customers, record customer calls, and send that to a leader and say, we have a problem here. Our customers are not happy, or our employees are not happy. Look at customers, employee surveys if you have any, and then share that widely. It's not the job of HR to just look at employee surveys. It's the job of everybody. So go on the cover. Infiltrate a team. Go and swap jobs with somebody for a day to see what it feels like to be in that team. Because if you're trying to bring cross-functional teams together, how can you lead those teams efficiently if you don't know what how finance operates, or if you don't know how legal operates? Sometimes it's interesting to just learn how people work in different departments. As I said, look at the employee survey. We used to have one every other year in a place that I've worked. Nobody ever looked at it. So you ask questions of your employees. What's the culture like? What do you want to see improve? If you don't read it, what's the point? And the famous idea box. Have something in the cafeteria or in the canteen that's everybody can have a good idea. So put them into one place. Help people feel responsible and accountable for creating new, or having new ideas and creating new product. So, an example of what I call innovation at the core and innovation at the edge. Innovation at the core is where companies have the right culture and the right system to innovate. Innovation at the edge is where corporates think it's somebody else's problem, as in either an investment via one of their VCs or one of their acquisition, or via an innovation lab. The first good example is Nokia. Nokia, I've never worked for Nokia, by the way, but when you look at the amount of change and reinvention that they've done over the past 100+ years, they were a paper mill, a factory, initially. They made phone, and then the phone disappeared, and then now they're back again. They worked in network and data. They've launched scales and health tech devices. Yes, most of the organization has changed, and they've swapped people around. But ultimately, if a company can reinvent themselves constantly, it's because the culture inside the organization drives that constant reinvention. Another example is Lego. I talked about staying true to your purpose. That's one example where Lego nearly went bankrupt. We all, I don't know if you've got kids, but I've got 2 little boys. We play Lego quite a lot. And the purpose of Lego is to play and to create play. What Lego did with those 2 products on screen was going away from this. They had ready-made product, ready-made toys, basically. So, of course, it was completely different from their original brick assembling sort of game. When they realized that this was going to tank the company, they scrapped the entire product line. They went back to true play, true brick-based play, and now look where they are. On the other side of the spectrum, you've got the corporates who are investing in startup because they realize that their legacy architecture or infrastructure doesn't allow them to go fast enough. This is a bank that I've worked with in the UK called Santander. They have set up a whole startup outside of the core organization because they just couldn't go fast enough to market. And we've launched a small startup called Asto for small business. But the risk when you are doing this is that you take people from the corporate and you put them into a startup. Yes, you hire new people. But if you impose the same rules and the same process and the same language, the same tools to your startup, then it's not really a startup anymore, is it? It's just a mini version of a corporate. So that's the risk to watch out for. And then the last lesson, I think, when you do corporate or entrepreneurship work, is to leverage your audience wisely. So these three examples are all investments that were made the Daily Mail group in the UK, a big news group. They are the world's largest English news paper in the world. They've got the biggest audience in English news. Voucher was one idea launched by one person in the organization. It was sold for 29 million a few years later. Timber and ZipJet were also sort of very small startup that were funded by the group, by the MGT. In this case, the core never bothered about the startup. The startup were outside of the main office, of the main building. There were different people, different names, different contracts. They just had the investment. And that's why I think they got really successful, is they had the audience of the core, or the customers of the core, and the power and the influence of the core, but set up in a very culture, in a different environment. And I've managed to get some time back. So I'm going to get... Hello. I said I was going to try to win some time back to get back.
Very efficient.
Yes.
So we were reviewing the questions. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Big round of applause for Héloïse. So question number one, how to keep change champions motivated in corporate environment?
That's a very good question. It takes a lot of energy. I was a change champion. You need to fuel that constantly. I think having the good leaders, I was extremely lucky that I had an amazing boss to drive change. So having that leader who you can, almost like a mentor, who can guide you and reward you and support you, and somebody you can just, you can unload your problems and you can go and vent sometime. That's really important. Successes and telling stories is really important. The role of HR and communication departments is sometimes underestimated when it comes to sharing the positive stuff. Whether it's a newsletter, whether it's a webcast across the organization. Those change champions need to be recognized, and they are the face of change and the voice of change. So give them a space in the newsletter, give them a space on the webcast. Just talk about their initiative. That is how they feel rewarded and motivated. And then I think there is the question of money sometimes. A special bonus. In your performance appraisal, sometimes you have a structure that says you can have your core work, and then you can have extra or going above and beyond. That's where you recognize them by additional financial bonus.
Thank you. Question number two. What would be the very first step in this mindset change? What can we change today while we are still here?
It depends what you want to change, I guess. It depends what's not working. Mindset is a big word. I would look at, as I said, go on discovery and ask questions. What's not working? Why is making people unhappy? Why is the culture not supporting your initiatives? Once you've got those questions answered by a varied group of people across the organization, you can start finding the weaknesses and the weak spots to try to incubate those small changes.
And the last very quick question. According to your experience, what is the best book about innovation and corporate culture?
Very good question. So I do like Robert Richmond's Culture Hack book. He made a business out of not just selling shoes, but actually their corporate book, their culture book became an interesting one. To be very honest, I don't really read that many books, like theory, because I'm in the doing on a day-to-day basis with teams. So I think the best way of getting started is just getting started, really, is just trying. I've got a colleague who wrote something called "This Might Get Me Fired." Well, I've made myself redundant 3 times because I was done. I had done my piece of work. Sometimes it's just do it.
Being a practitioner.
What the weather can happen.
Being a practitioner is a way to go.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you very much, Héloïse.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.